Hey guys, Southern Style Gaming here, and today I'm going to do something a little different. Now, I'm a pretty big NFL fan. I'm something of an amateur historian. I mean, I'm not like a Jaguar Gator 9 or anything, but I kind of know my stuff. I like to go back, watch old clips. I've watched a couple old games, and I just find it really interesting to go back and look at the history of this sport. Now, today I'm going to talk about something that I don't know if I'd call it sad or tragic. It's certainly not that dramatic. But I do think I'd call it a disappointment. And that's the fact that, we sort of have some old names that are just starting to be lost to time. It's not that they're never being brought up, but most of the time when they are, they're brought up by the older folks that actually watched these people play. And it seems like the casual football fan really doesn't know their names anymore. And personally, I just think that's kind of a shame. Now, with this most recent Super Bowl, we have seen Patrick Mahomes basically make his way into the GOAT conversation, which before is basically a debate between Joe Montana and Tom Brady, and for good reason. But now Patrick Mahomes seems to have sort of edged his way in here, and while I do think it's a little too early, I don't want to jump the gun on this. I will say I think it is certainly fine to speculate about whether or not this kid will end up as one of the best to ever do it, because he is absolutely a fantastic talent. He's leading a dynasty right now. He's the first quarterback since Tom Brady to win back-to-back Super Bowls, and yes, I know, it's not just the quarterback's game. It's a team game, and probably one of the biggest, team-reliant games that you can find. But still, it's an extremely impressive feat to have won back-to-back Super Bowls. Especially considering the fact that basically every Super Bowl, he's sort of been in a different system. They've had to change their offense over and over again because, just the nature of the game today. You're constantly losing players, having to switch them out. And I think Patrick Mahomes absolutely deserves to be in the conversation, at least speculatively. I don't think he's there yet. But I do think it is absolutely fair to say that, we can talk about it. Not necessarily firmly put him there, but we can talk about it. Now, of course, don't take my word as gospel. I do have a bit of bias. I was born probably about a half an hour from where Patrick grew up in Tyler, Texas. So, make of that what you will. But what I want to talk about today is about basically an NFL golden trio of the past that people seem to have kind of forgotten about. Names that, even as a kid, I heard mentioned all the time when some of the best quarterbacks of all time were debated and talked about. And I'm going to sort of compare them situationally to the quarterbacks that we consider the greatest of all time right now. And those three quarterbacks are Otto Graham, Johnny Unitas, and Bart Starr. Now, like I said, I think each of these are situationally comparable to one of the quarterbacks in the modern trio. I'm not necessarily doing career path, and I'm not really going to talk that much about the playoffs because all of these quarterbacks have had playoff success. Otherwise, they would have never been in the conversation to begin with. So I'm not really going to talk much about that. Now, I'm going to start with Otto Graham, who I actually think, despite what most people would say, is most comparable to Joe Montana. Now, I know some people would say, well, it's Tom Brady that he's comparable to. I mean, they literally have the same championship record, Tom Brady went to 7 Super Bowls, or he went to 10 Super Bowls, won 7, lost 3. In a similar vein, Otto Graham, back when the NFL championship was the top of the mountain, or, before that, he was in, I think it was the All-American Football League that he spent the first 4 years in. He also went, he went to 10 championships, won 7, lost 3. And I just think, that is sort of an interesting parallel, but I honestly think the better fit for him is Joe Montana. And the reason why is because of their coaches. Now, Joe Montana, of course, was under the wing of the brilliant Bill Walsh. Great offensive mind, great innovator, with a little bit of help, of course, he basically invented the West Coast offense, something that most teams to this day still incorporate some aspects of in their offense. Like, nobody really runs the pure West Coast anymore, but there's no teams that don't really have some sort of influence of it in their system. Like, you've got timing routes, you've got this sort of, short pass to set up the deep ball. It's almost like a obsolescing of the running to set up the pass philosophy. It's very interesting to see. And Bill Walsh is basically like, the godfather of the West Coast offense. In a similar vein, Otto Graham was under the wing of Paul Brown, who was also a great innovator, although in a pretty different way. So, Paul Brown was really more of an innovator in the way that the sport was studied. So, he was the first to try and implement helmets in the radios in the helmets, and it didn't work very well. He actually ended up having Otto hearing, I think, orders from like a taxi service or something. But he tried it. The technology just wasn't there yet. But it's interesting that pretty much every team does that today. Pretty much every team has it where the radios are in the helmets, and the quarterback is getting the plays from the coach on the sideline. I just think that's kind of a cool little fact there. Another thing, and definitely the more important thing, is that Paul Brown was really the one all classroom. So, before that, it wasn't super common for players to be, sitting in a classroom, learning about concepts, learning about plays, basically being taught the system that a team runs. But Paul Brown basically kind of established that, and going forward, that actually became pretty commonplace. So, it's kind of interesting there. Paul Brown, just another little factoid here, is that he actually invented the draw play, and that it happened by complete accident. Basically, one day in practice, Otto took a snap, and he kind of stumbled, and it was supposed to be a pass play, but then he stumbled. He kind of couldn't get his footing real well, so he basically just kind of gave the ball to Marion Motley, and then Paul Brown's like, wait a minute, we got something here. Just kind of a funny little thing there. That's basically how the draw play was invented. So, Otto Graham, an absolute great player. He won 3 NFL championships. He went 4-0 in AAFL championships, if I'm getting that correct. But, before they folded, and the Browns and 49ers came from them into the NFL, and basically immediately the Browns established themselves as a dominant team. But, I think it's really interesting how in that way it is kind of parallel to Joe Montana and Bill Walsh and his innovative West Coast offense. Paul Brown was sort of innovative in the terms of how the sport was learned. Now, on the other hand, you've got the sort of situational coaching comparison between Bart Starr and Tom Brady. Now, with Bart Starr and Tom Brady, they both learned under some of the best coaches the sport has ever seen. And, of course, those would be Vince Lombardi and Bill Belichick. Now, the thing that they have in common is that they were both super fundamentalists. So, Bill, all about the defense. Vince was he was a little different because he definitely had a tough defense. But on offense, he was all about that running game, all about the power sweep. And, unfortunately, that's why, you don't see these dazzling numbers for Bart. But at the same time, that's why they had so much success. Because Vince was just, he was the guy that, would just sort of run it down your throat, wear you out. And then, Bart, he stepped up when he needed to. They both sort of have their moments where Tom Brady and Bart Starr, the rest of the team definitely played their part, but they stepped up when they had to. Tom Brady's got a game like 28-3. Bart Starr, obviously, he's got the Ice Bowl. It's just kind of cool to see the comparisons between those two. And they both have absolutely immaculate playoff success. I mean, Bart Starr, it's kind of funny that, to this day, I'm pretty sure Bart Starr still has the best playoff win percentage of any quarterback, because, I mean, he 90%. He won 90% of his games. He literally got to his first NFL championship game in the 60s against the Eagles, and he lost. And after that happened, Bart just kind of decided that he would never lose in the playoffs again. So, his 9-1 playoff record is still to this day something that's extremely impressive. Otto Graham and the Browns, they did great. There wasn't a single year of Otto's career he missed a championship game, but, I still find it personally just a little more impressive that Bart Starr, he lost his first one. Then in the next 2 years, he went back-to-back. And then from 65 to 67, they have the first NFL championship three-peat. A legitimate three-peat, not, the whatever it was in the 20s and 30s where the Packers, funny enough, it was the Packers again, that went, 3 years in a row winning the championship. Although, like I said, before the championship was voted on, this time it was actually played. And, I find that really cool. That they have their playoff success, and a lot of people will say the same things about Brady and Starr. They'll say, oh, it was their teams that sort of, they were carried to those championships. And I don't know, they had really good teams, but at the same time, they were really good quarterbacks. They stepped up when they had to. They did what they had to do to win. And now, for the final comparison, I'm going to give that up to Patrick Mahomes and his comparison to Johnny Unitas. Now, the play styles there are starkly different, so I'm sure a lot of people are saying, what are you doing comparing these two? Are you insane? No, hear me out. Johnny Unitas changed the game. At the end of the day, he changed the game. And I think Patrick Mahomes is kind of doing the same thing. They were both, I'd say, the most talented quarterbacks of their eras. I'd say even though Johnny Unitas, he didn't win the most championships in his time, I'd still say, he was the most talented quarterback of his time. And I'd say much the same applies to Patrick Mahomes. He's easily the best quarterback that we have in the league right now. Obviously, he's not anywhere near done with his career, even though a lot of people seem to think his career won't be that long because, his all that running around stuff. But, I mean, come on, guys. Fran Tarkenton, John Elway, Steve Young, we've seen running quarterbacks have good, successful, long careers. Come on, John Elway retired at 39. Are we really going to argue that Patrick Mahomes' athleticism in an admittedly softer league is going to have him retiring at 30? Is that really the angle we're going for here? But anyway, that's off point. I'd say they were both the most talented, and they have really changed the way that the game is played. Patrick, the way he uses his athleticism in the passing game, the way that, he sort of changed the way quarterbacks are looked at. He's sort of off-kilter in a way. He's unconventional. And while I wouldn't say that the same was true for Johnny Unitas, he was definitely more of a fundamental, mechanics-type quarterback. But in many ways, he did change the game. He sort of invented the idea of, quarterback wide receiver chemistry. Him and Raymond Berry, for many years, they were considered a great quarterback wide receiver combination. And you can kind of see the same thing with Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. I feel like that's a pretty obvious comparison here. At the same time, Johnny Unitas is also well known for inventing the 2-minute drill. Now, of course, this came about at its biggest prominence in the 1958 NFL Championship, most commonly known as the greatest game ever played. Now, it's not actually the greatest game ever played. I've watched a little bit of it. I haven't watched the whole thing, but, it has that name for a reason. Its history is interesting. It's basically the reason that the NFL sort of replaced baseball as the biggest sport in America because, people realized, hey, this is a really fun sport to watch. And if I'm not mistaken, it was the very first game in NFL history to go into overtime. And the reason that that was even possible was because Johnny Unitas ran that 2-minute drill at the end to get a touchdown and tie the game up. And Johnny Unitas, I'd say he was sort of like the godfather of the 2-minute drill. And now that's such a common thing that pretty much every team practices on a common basis. I just think it's really cool how, that Johnny Unitas was basically the one that, I wouldn't say perfected it, but, he was definitely the first one to really, be able to do that. Just take a team down the field methodically and just get that last score, win when he really needed to. The dude was just really good at doing that. And at the end of the day, like I said, I feel like the comparison between him and Patrick Mahomes is absolutely an appropriate one. I know a lot of people are probably going to be mad that I'm comparing the two because in terms of play style, they are very starkly different. But at the end of the day, in terms of talent, I think they really are just the same guy. They are both great, talented quarterbacks, best of their respective eras. And honestly, at this point, as much as people don't want to believe it, because I know there's a lot of hate for Patrick Mahomes out there right now, I don't think you can really debate that he is the best quarterback we have in the league right now. And that the landscape in the league is different because of him. So I just thought that would sort of be a little interesting things. These are just some guys, some names that I really don't want being lost to the sands of time in NFL history because, like I said, you'll still hear a lot of hardcore fans talking about these guys, but your casual fans, they just don't really, hear their names. They don't, discuss them anymore. Like, I wouldn't be surprised to hear a lot of them say they don't even know who these guys are. It's sad, but it's true. Like, unless you're a Colts fan, you might not know who Johnny Unitas is. I feel like he's probably still the most well-known of the three, but, I'd definitely say if you're a Browns fan, you're probably the only ones in the NFL below the age of, I'd say, about 25 that would even have any idea who he is. Because, I'm 26, and I would occasionally hear his name growing up in NFL circles, but you just don't anymore, And I think another aspect of it is this sort of unfair disrespect that the old generation of football players is getting. A lot of people are saying, oh, well, they were older, this is sort of it's become a meme that, oh, they were all just, dock workers and press operators. And I just don't think that's really fair. They were very talented, very passionate about the sport. And I think with the right training, conditioning, and all that, I think a lot of those players really could make it in the league today. So, I think it's kind of unfair to just say that, oh, they played in the 50s, the competition just wasn't as high. I just don't think that's really a fair thing to say, because obviously today's players are going to be better on a scientific level because nutritional science is better, medical science is better, the science of training has improved even over the last 20 years. Players are at least marginally faster and stronger. I still think a guy like Ray Lewis could make it in today's NFL, but I think your average defender today is a little bit more talented, but at the same time, they are restricted by the rules. But again, I'm getting off topic. I say that, but I'm basically done discussing what I came on this video to discuss. So, with that said, I hope y'all enjoyed it. God bless. Have a great day. Oh, and P.S. I'm going to try and keep a schedule of, having a video out either every Thursday or every Friday. Just, depending on what my work schedule permits. So, now, with that said, hope y'all have a great day, and God bless.